Hey there, this is CJ Miller. I'm in Shreveport, Louisiana. Come check us out. There's a view. We're across from the Red River, uh, across the Red River from Bossier City, North Louisiana. Yeah, we want to have you. Okay, so I'm going to get right into this. I'm talking about a movie that I just watched tonight. I streamed it, Barbarian. It's a horror movie. I didn't see it in the theater. I really didn't have much of an interest, but I was bored tonight, so I decided to stream it. And very interesting. Uh, it starts out, somewhat uniquely, but of course, uh, when when the female lead Tess, they okay, so she and the first male, they end up being double booked at a home. Through Airbnb, and it's kind of in a seedy neighborhood, rundown neighborhood. Uh, and so they end up getting double. Well, spoiler alert, by the way. And uh, so she's there to you know do some work, documenting the music scene in Detroit or something like that. So she leaves. They work it out. She leaves the next day, goes to a job interview, and then comes back. And as she's getting things together, I think she goes to the restroom, realizes that there's no uh, paper, no bathroom tissues. So she goes to the basement to get some bathroom tissues, ends up getting locked in the basement, and discovers uh, a secret room and a network of secret tunnels, uh, basically. But that gets discovered when the guy Keith comes back, and she hands him the house keys, and then she's like, "Hey, we got to get out of here." And he's like, "Well, let me go check it out myself." From that point on, the movie, of course, it gets told a little out of sequence, but the movie then begins to um, emulate in all of its tropes a movie from 1981 called Hell Night. Now, this movie, Hell Night, it's a fraternity and sorority hazing that takes place in an old rundown castle. And so they're secluded in that castle for the night. They're locked in. And what happens is the rest of the movie is they're exploring underground tunnels. Uh, Except in this movie, um, the owner of the property is going through a dilemma. Uh, he's uh, 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 he's in the movie industry, and he is accused of rape, which he confesses to rape to one of his buddies, basically in a roundabout way. But he returns to the house to try to liquidate and sell off some of the properties that he's owning, and this is one of them. And he ends up uh, going down to the basement and discovering this network of tunnels that he never really realized was there. And as he's down there exploring it to try to find out space, so that's these three people who are down in this basement in this house, and they run across this monster, which is basically an old naked woman. Now in Hell Night, what happens are the teens, the college co-eds. Uh, there's four of them, and then there's three of them running around the property, pulling pranks on them, and they end up in a network of tunnels running from a monster, a male. And the story there with Garth Manners is a family, and they give the backstory in the beginning at Hell Night, where it's a family of basically deformed, hideous freaks. It's just one deformity after another, and the father goes crazy one day and slaughters the whole family, but uh, you know, uh, two of the bodies are not found, and so at the end of it, you have like you find out that there are two dwellers, two monsters in the in the bowels of the property. And that is the case with this movie, where it's for 30 or 40 years or whatever, uh, two dwellers have been living. uh, the nude woman and then her father, who's bedridden, but they're way down in the basement. Nobody knows they're there, and basically he kept her. Yeah, he's been it's been a freaky kind of thing where it's been like a lot of you know he yeah was horrible to her. The father apparently like just molested her and inbred and everything like that. So she's really obsessed with like keeping the people that she finds in the house as babies. You know, she wants to be the mother. She wants to mother them or whatever. You know, apparently maybe when she has uh, babies, maybe the father does something to them, ditches them. I don't know what happened. I don't know. But anyway, there's probably going to be a sequel. There was not a sequel to Hell Night, but there have been infinite movies with the same trope, you know. But this was so unique. They were running around the tunnels underneath the house in both of the movies, and it's the trick is very easy to do. You're like a huge network of tunnels, but all they're really doing is running around the same corner of tunnels from different angles. It's really kind of neat. And then at one point, you know, one of the characters in each of the movies breaks free, understands what's going on. They break free, and then uh, go back with they try to get help from the police in both movies. The police don't believe them. One, because it's in Hell Night, because it's Hell Night and Frat Night, and they think it's a prank. And in Detroit, in the second movie, because they think the girl's just like out of it, out of her gourd, like just you know, and she's trying to get into the house, but she didn't have keys or anything like that. So they're like, we can't go in there without a warrant and everything like that. We got stuff to do. You know what I mean? So they really don't take, the police don't take their roles very serious in either one of these. And it's a non-plausible point, and but then is it, because we know things like that have happened in real life, that the police should have paid more attention to complaints, but due to not having uh, enough just cause, they didn't at the time that they didn't feel they didn't bother with it, or they thought someone was like crazy or something like that. Uh, in the Jeffrey Dahmer case, they didn't believe the one. Uh, uh, and this was a real thing, and they didn't believe the one victim what was a victim. So I mean that happens in real life, sometimes that police don't take it the complaints serious enough to investigate. So it seems non-plausible, but in real world it's plausible that sometimes the police won't do that anyway. So she goes back in to rescue him. So she's playing the uh, uh, so some of the tropes, some of the roles get switched around a little bit, but all of the tropes are there. The styling of this movie, Barbarian, is a little different. It's a little modern. It's the narrative is disjointed, uh, but it's basically, if these movies are basically interchangeable. You could take these characters from Barbarian, and you could set them in Hell Night, and you could take the characters from Hell Night and you can set them in Barbarian. And the difference is, maybe at one point you had the Linda Blair character Marty talking to Peter Barton, his character in the movie, and they're talking about social economics, and that's the political commentary du jour of the day. And it was everything was that was the politics of the day, and the politics of the day today have a lot to do with the uh, gender roles, where Tess is like, if I were a woman and you were a man and you came to the house, there's no way I'd let you in, but you'd probably just force yourself in. And he's like, well, you forced yourself in anyway, although he did invite her in. But but it was kind of like, she was like, I was scared and everything, so whatever. So I mean, they had that same bonding experience. It's the same, even though the narrative is disjointed, the uh, the pacing is pretty similar. Pacing is pretty similar. There's even uh, a squatter character in this movie that's in the rundown neighborhood, and he's the one that's like, hey, like he kind of plays the uh, at one point he plays kind of the character that Seth was in Hell Night, where he's like, you know, he's trying to tell the people, uh, uh, the squatter, he's telling the two people, hey, just sit tight, it's okay, and he's reassuring them nothing's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden there's a jump scare. Well, so Seth, in Hell Night, he's telling him, hey, I shot the guy, I shot him, and there's nothing, there's I got him, you should have seen him, and he was like an animal, and all of a sudden, like a jump scare, where uh, so it's kind of like, um, uh, two monsters in the house, or two monsters in the tunnels underneath the house, and people discovering the mystery of the monsters in the house, their origin and their backstory. Uh, Point for point for point for point, these two movies hit on all the exact same thing, uh, up and down. So Barbarian I've always wondered, was Hell Knight ever going to get remade? I would say Barbarian is probably the closest thing to a Hell Knight ripoff, or remake. However you want to put it. Horror movies borrow from each other and steal tropes and rip each other off and mimic each other. So all in all, it was a good movie, and you know, uh, it was an updated take on this. The people who have been in the house so long, people have forgotten about them, so much so that the house has even been sold to one of the characters. Uh, I guess maybe he scooped it up from the banks when the banks took it, when the family went missing or whatever. So I mean, you can look for probably a sequel to Barbarian, but if not, it's such a uh, it's so interchangeable, the plot points and everything with Hell Knight, um, beat for beat, and the template is exactly the same. I would say the one thing I think I've already said it, but the the backstory gets explored in Barbarian uh, more uh, later in the film than actually the beginning of Hell Night, where the characters are walking up to the big scary rundown Garth Manor, and they're given the backstory as to spook them out. So they have to stay in the house one night in Hell Night, and in this one, they're kind of like there overnight. The Airbnb people, because there's a convention in town, and they can't find another room, so they decide to go ahead and just share the Airbnb and deal with the complication tomorrow morning. And so, yeah, it the time frame uh, runs differently, but if you watch those two movies back to back, you'll see what I'm talking about. And the reason why I would recognize this template is because I love 1981's Hell Night, uh, featuring Linda Blair as Marty, uh, and Jeff was played by Peter Barton, of Burke's Law fame. He also was in Friday the 13th, Part 4, which was supposed to be the final chapter, but it wasn't. He was a good guy in that one too. He was a consummate good guy in everything. He first came to notoriety in a really really cheesy film called The Powers of Matthew Starr, or later on it was rebranded as The Powers of David Starr. Or whatever. He was like a little alien thing. He was kind of like uh, Starman. He was that. I don't know. or the when Starman was a series, there was the Starman's son, and he would communicate with his dad, do a little thing. It was kind of like that, half alien or whatever. I don't know, whatever. Uh, that was Peter Barton, and then also in that movie we had what is his name? Vincent Van Patten, who was noted for doing a lot of guest starring and special guest star and featuring in a lot of TV movies. He was part of the Van Patten family, and yeah, that's that Van Patten from Eight is Enough, the dad, and then the because that was is his family, there was a bunch of them. So he was also a famous professional tennis player, uh, and so Vincent Van Patten, had two careers going at the same time, and kind of took a back seat from acting. I think he's still around though. Uh, I know that Linda Blair is doing the World Heart Foundation with animals and humanitarian efforts, primarily working with uh, sheltering pit bulls and other large breed dogs, and you know, um, and Peter Barton, what is he doing these days? I don't know. Anyway, I love that movie. It was like it was one of the first uh, that 1981, and I saw it not at the theater, of course. I saw it on TV, HBO, about a year or so later. Perhaps a later part of '82, going into '83, and you know, it was a good movie, and that's why I was able to recognize the template of this movie. Not to mention I've seen a zillion horror movies, but this one was the closest to Hell Night. It's basically a remake without saying that it's a remake. And it doesn't take place over the course of one night. It takes place over several days, possibly a couple of weeks. And then what there are some variations as to the motive of the creatures, like the Garth Manor, the uh, you know uh, the father and the son that are the monsters. They basically just want, and I always thought they were father and son. Some have speculated that they were brothers. I always thought it was like Raymond Garth and the youngest Garth, Andrew Garth. Uh, and so anyway, and then but in the commentary, they referred to the monsters as brothers. But I believe in the narrative, to me, it was always maybe brother, father and son. But one certainly looked that way. But anyway, um, I know in this movie it's certainly the father and the daughter, and they're both, they have their backstory that they're dealing with or whatever. So yeah, um, so there are enough differences that they're two different films, and that it's not a direct remake. But boy, is it so much like it that if I mean, if you watch Barbarian, follow it up and watch Hell Night uh, with it, make it a double feature. It's like, oh my god, okay, well, I just feel like I'm just seeing the same movie, different styling, of course, and then of course even the topical, hey, we have to talk about some sort of social uh, commentary thing as a sort of a red herring, as a meaning, as a what should be subtext, but it's not actually subtext if it's right on the surface. So it's almost exploitation, you know. And in fact, it is. If it's not subtext, something like that, then it actually is exploitation. But these are cheesy special effects horror movies anyway. So yeah, um, if you're out there and you've seen Barbarian, uh, and you're seeing this, then watch Hell Night from 1981. It's available on Tubi, YouTube, pretty much anywhere it's been out there. You can see it, and of course, it's stylized Hell Night as more of a slasher, slaughter, teen slaughter kind of thing. But really, it's the tone and everything. Yeah. So for that reason, uh, Barbarian for me gets a rating of how would I say it? What's my rating system on this? Um, yeah, SS gets an SS rating for a subscription streaming because I watched it on HBO Max. I wouldn't necessarily buy it outright as an individual streaming, but as part of my HBO Max, I gladly watched it. Um, and uh, yeah, Hell Night gets an O because it was entirely original. It. Yes, it was. And then sort of not because it also kind of reminded me of Lovecraft's. I forget the name of the short story, but it's the one where the where the creature sees his reflection and he realizes that he's the monster. Maybe it's the outsider or the insider or something like where he realizes that he's actually the monster and he comes to realize he's the monster that people are fearing and that the people he really is a monster. That short story actually went to influence a movie later on. I want to say 1995, uh, featuring Barbara Crampton and Jeffrey Combs of New Moon Features fame, and they did a movie called Castle Freak, which, by the way, has recently been remade uh, and produced by Barbara Crampton uh, to visit the Lovecraftian themes. Okay, so I'm getting short on time here, so I'm going to say good night, God bless, love you guys, check out those movies, peace, pleasant dreams.